Picture this, because I still see it every time I close my eyes. I push open the screen door of my grandmother's old farmhouse one cold Montana morning, coffee still steaming in my hand, expecting to see the same quiet view I'd fallen in love with: pines, frost, and a soft strip of gravel driveway leading out to the road. Instead, I stop dead. My land, my entire 2 acres, is wrapped in a 6-foot deep trench like some medieval moat. Fresh dirt piled high, tire tracks everywhere, diesel fumes hanging in the air like a bad dream that hasn't burned off yet. And there, at the edge of that trench, stands Veronica Halston, the self-appointed queen of the Maple Crest Owners Association, holding a shovel and smiling like she just did me a favor. My name's Ethan Croswell. I spent 22 years in the Army as an electrician, crawling through ceilings and bunkers, fixing problems other people created, deploying to places where the air tasted like dust and fear. After the divorce, after lawyers, after watching my savings drain away one court date at a time, the only thing that felt solid under my feet was the letter from my grandmother Helen Croswell's attorney telling me I was now the owner of her place in Silver Ridge, Montana. 2 acres of pine and rock, a 1940s farmhouse that still smelled faintly of cinnamon and old paper, and a wraparound porch where Grandma used to sip coffee and talk about mountains that never lie to you. Out here, mornings used to start with the crunch of deer hooves on frosted pine needles, the air so clean it made my years in Las Vegas feel like I'd been breathing the inside of a muffler. I thought this land would finally be my reset button, a place to heal, to work with my hands, to maybe remember who I was before deployments and divorce. What I didn't know was that my real battlefield was going to be my own driveway. Veronica Halston had only lived in Maple Crest Estates for 3 years, but if you heard her talk, you'd think her family carved the subdivision out of the mountainside with their bare hands. She drove a white luxury SUV with custom plates, heels that slammed into my wooden porch like a judge's gavel, and she wore this cloying perfume that lingered in the cold air long after she left, like territorial spray in a bottle. She ruled the 4-person board of the Maple Crest Owners Association by intimidation, turning every HOA meeting into a public trial. I watched her make a 70-year-old retiree, Frank Dalton, shake like a leaf because his mailbox was supposedly 3 inches too tall. That should have been my warning. Instead, I told myself to stay out of it. I was the new guy, the Army guy, the one who didn't want trouble. Trouble found me anyway. One afternoon, I came home from a job and found a bright notice taped to my front door like a scarlet letter. Non-conforming accessory structures must be removed within 30 days. They were talking about my grandmother's chicken coop and tool shed, structures that had survived blizzards, hailstorms, and 3 generations of Croswells. Daily fine for noncompliance, $150, effective immediately. I actually laughed, standing there on that old porch, because it seemed too ridiculous to be real. Then the inspection started. Every few days, Veronica Halston would appear unannounced, clipboard in one hand, tape measure and camera in the other. She'd pace my yard like an appraiser of some museum exhibit she didn't like, measuring my lawn, shooting photos of my work truck in the driveway, checking the angle of my fence posts. Her perfume would trail behind her, hanging in the mountain air long after her SUV disappeared down the road, a sweet, synthetic reminder that she believed this land was hers to judge. Then the anonymous complaints started to roll in. Noise violations when I used power tools at noon on a weekday. Suspicious activity whenever neighbors stopped by with a blown fuse or a bad outlet. One complaint said my grandmother's 40-year-old oak tree was obstructing sight lines and negatively impacting property values. That tree had shaded my grandmother's porch since before half these houses even existed. And what burned me most wasn't just what she did to me. It was what she'd already done to the people who came before me. Frank Dalton next door showed me the violation letters he'd gotten over his wife Linda Dalton's memorial rose garden. Emily Park across the street had a file an inch thick over her kids' swing set and plastic slide. 3 families had already sold and moved away, exhausted and broke from trying to fight the storm of fines and lawyer letters. The pattern wasn't subtle. It was a tactic. That weekend, instead of enjoying my hard-won peace, I sat in the county courthouse, digging through filing cabinets and digital archives, breathing in the musty smell of old paper and toner. What I found didn't just make me angry, it made me cold. Every one of my grandmother's buildings had been inspected and approved decades earlier. Grandfathered in. Protected. And according to multiple county surveys, my 2 acres were never legally included inside the boundaries of Maple Crest Owners Association. In other words, Veronica Halston had exactly 0 legitimate authority over my land. I mailed her a certified letter with copies of every document, deeds, surveys, approvals. Her response came quietly, without phone calls or emails. The next notice on my door listed my fines at double the amount. No explanation, no discussion, just a bigger hammer. The Army taught me something simple. When something smells wrong, you don't ignore it. You investigate. So I went deeper. This time, I pulled the state incorporation documents for the Maple Crest Owners Association itself. Their boundary map was off by as much as 50 feet in several spots. Their claim of unanimous consent from property owners looked a little too neat. While I was still connecting dots, Veronica escalated. I pulled into my driveway one day to find a county code enforcement officer waiting, clipboard in hand. He told me someone had reported an illegal auto repair business operating on my property. The complaint packet had photos taken from angles that made my neighbor's truck, another neighbor's minivan, and my daughter's boyfriend's pickup look like a junkyard operation. Tools were framed just right to look like an assembly line. After 20 minutes of walking around, he sighed and said, "Look, this isn't what the report says it is. But I have to file something. It's protocol." That night, instead of stewing, I drove into town and bought 8 high-definition security cameras with cloud backup and motion alerts. If Veronica Halston wanted to play games with angles and accusations, I was done playing defense blind. I spent 3 days wiring those cameras along my fence line, above my workshop, covering every inch of my property. They recorded only what was mine. Legally solid. Militarily thorough. The first major payoff came 5 days later, at 5:47 a.m. My phone buzzed with a motion alert. Groggy, I rolled over expecting to see a deer or maybe Frank walking his dog. Instead, I watched Veronica Halston, in a dark coat, telephoto lens in hand, sneaking along my backyard, zooming in on my workshop windows like she was casing the joint. The audio was crisp in the thin mountain air. "If I can get enough photos of his equipment," she whispered to someone off camera, "I can claim he's running unlicensed contracting out of here." Right then, I had her. Trespassing. Plotting. On video. On audio. The younger version of me wanted to burst through the back door and end it on the spot. The older, battle-tested version of me just hit save, created 3 backups, and thought, fine. Keep talking. Keep coming. Because every step she took on my land now made my case stronger. And I had a feeling this war was just getting started. Over the next month, my cameras turned into a private documentary about Veronica Halston's obsession. 14 times, she crept onto my land. Pre-dawn, after dark, measuring fences, photographing my electrical meter, even scooping soil from my garden into little bags like she was hunting for environmental violations. The same diesel smell that woke me up the morning of the trench showed up over and over again. And the footage finally explained why. Her boyfriend's company, Halston Earthworks, was out there too, surveying with professional gear, hammering stakes into the ground, arguing about easements like my property was a job site they already owned. While the cameras logged every trespass, I went back to the county records chasing something Frank had mentioned, a previous owner who sold my house for $40,000 below market value after too many problems with the HOA. The transfer histories told a story as clean as a spreadsheet. Harassment, fines, violations, then a panicked sale at a discount. The buyer? Almost every time, some entity tied to Halston Ridge Realty, the firm owned by Veronica and her husband. 6 houses, all original families, all pushed out. I invited Frank Dalton over, sat him down at my grandmother's kitchen table, and showed him the footage and the numbers. His hands shook as he scrolled. "She's been terrorizing this place since the day she moved in," he said. "We just didn't have proof." Proof, or at least the beginning of it, was exactly what I had. But I knew I was out of my depth. I'm a good electrician. I'm not a good prosecutor. That's why I called Rachel Monroe, a retired sheriff's detective who'd spent her career untying knots just like this. She showed up in jeans and boots, spread my documents out like crime scene photos, and walked me through the pattern. Halston Ridge Realty snapping up distressed homes, a code enforcement officer with ties to Veronica, a judge who golfed with her husband, a city councilman related by marriage. It wasn't random. It was a web. "This isn't about grass height," she said. "This is about control and profit." Then came the recording that changed everything. One night, Rachel's audio equipment picked up voices in Veronica's driveway, carried clear through the still mountain air. It was Veronica, laughing, talking to her boyfriend. "Once we get rid of these old families, we'll control $3 million in mineral rights," she said. "The Northern Plains Energy deal closes next month. Then we're gone. Belize. Offshore accounts are ready. Mineral rights. All at once, the trench, the harassment, the market sales, they snapped into place. This wasn't about neat hedges. It was about what lay under our foundations." Rachel dug up an old geological survey, significant natural gas deposits under the entire development. Every forced sale consolidated those rights under entities she controlled. My 2 acres weren't just sentimental. They were a missing piece of a multi-million-dollar puzzle. That same week, as if to prove how far she'd go, my cameras caught Halston Earthworks back on my land in the middle of the night. Her boyfriend walked through my grandmother's vegetable garden with a backpack sprayer, dousing every plant. By morning, the heirloom tomatoes my grandmother had nurtured from seeds her own mother brought over from Ireland were blackened, sagging, dying. The air burned with chemical stink. Lab tests later confirmed it. Industrial, grade glyphosate mixed with defoliant, illegal for residential use, strong enough to sterilize soil for years. On audio, you could hear Veronica's voice. "Make sure nothing ever grows there again. I want that garden dead." She poisoned my grandmother's legacy to make a point. It didn't have the effect she wanted. That same night, down in my basement with the power shut off for safety inspections, I found the manila envelope my grandmother had labeled HOA Incorporation Important. Inside were the original state filings for the Maple Crest Owners Association, including the signature page where every property owner supposedly agreed to join. My grandmother's signature was wrong. No graceful H, no careful C. It looked like someone had tried to imitate it from memory. I called Frank at dawn. He took one look at his late wife Linda's signature and shook his head. She never wrote her L like that. Arthritis wouldn't let her. Emily Park came next. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I was living in California the year this says I signed," she said. "I didn't move here until 2 years later. At least 8 signatures, fake. The entire HOA had been built on forged consent." Rachel sent the package to the FBI. Noah Dalton, Frank's grandson and a property rights attorney, came out and read everything. "Mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy," he said. "If we line this up with the real estate deals, we may be looking at RICO." Meanwhile, Veronica kept escalating, planting fake drug evidence near my shop, calling in anonymous tips, watching as DEA agents raided my property on live television only to find baking soda. She tried to crush my reputation, my livelihood, my sanity. All she really did was build a stronger case against herself. Because every move was now caught on camera, on audio, or in paper trails we were quietly stacking into neat, devastating piles. And the town was about to see every page. The morning of the town hall felt like deployment day. I woke to the rumble of diesel engines again. Halston Earthworks trucks and excavators boxed in my driveway. The foreman waving paperwork for an emergency waterline repair that, once again, just happened to block my only exit for 48 hours. They didn't just want to trap me on my land. They wanted to keep me away from the microphone. But by then, this wasn't just my fight. By 8 a.m., Frank Dalton rolled up at the head of a convoy. 30 pickup trucks filled with neighbors who'd been quietly terrorized for years. People who'd had gardens destroyed, kids' toys threatened, savings drained. "Nobody traps a veteran on his own land," Frank said, voice steady. "Move it, or we will." Sheriff's deputies arrived, took one look at the flimsy, emergency paperwork, and ordered the equipment moved. The road cleared. The message was clear too. Whatever happened that night, I wasn't walking into it alone. The high school gym that evening felt less like a community meeting and more like a tribunal. 280 people squeezed into bleachers and folding chairs. Another crowd gathered outside listening through speakers. Channel 9's cameras were set up in the back. In the front row sat FBI agent Carla Ruiz and state prosecutor Daniel Keene, flanked by county commissioners who suddenly looked a lot smaller than their titles. Veronica Halston swept in with private security and a crisis PR handler, dressed like she was about to announce a new charity, not defend herself in front of the people she'd been bleeding dry. When my name was called, I walked to the podium where my grandmother once argued for school funding, took a breath, and said, "I came to Silver Ridge for peace after 22 years in uniform. Instead, I found a war in my own backyard." The screen behind me lit up with my grandmother Helen Croswell's 1943 deed, proving her claim to the land long before any HOA existed. Then came the timeline. Quiet years, Veronica's arrival, the first violation, the avalanche after. We played the trench footage. The gym went silent as dawn. Lit video showed Veronica in a designer hard hat, directing the crew as they dug a 6-foot moat around my land. "Make it deep enough he can't drive out," her own voice echoed through the speakers. "That'll teach him to mess with us." "That's not the full story," she shouted from her seat. Her lawyer pulled her down. It was already too late. The money trail came next. Slide after slide of property transfers showing homes sold below market after intense HOA pressure, then flipped or held by entities tied to Halston Ridge Realty. Roughly $340,000 in commissions alone. We didn't have to accuse her. The numbers spoke. Then Dr. Eleanor Hayes, the handwriting expert, walked everyone through the signature analysis. My grandmother's real signature versus the forged one on the HOA incorporation. Linda's. Emily's. "These signatures were not written by the individuals named," she said. "The evidence of forgery is overwhelming." The air in the gym thickened, years of frustration condensing into anger that finally had somewhere to go. Frank stepped up with a worn photo of Linda's rose garden, voice breaking as he described coming home to find it bulldozed while he was buying groceries. Emily read a letter from her 8-year-old daughter asking strangers not to let the mean lady make them move. And then we played the mineral rights recording. "Once we get rid of these old families, we'll control $3 million in mineral rights. The Northern Plains Energy deal goes through next month. Then we relocate to Belize. The offshore accounts are ready." You could feel it hit the room like a shockwave. This wasn't about neat lawns. It was about cashing out on the land under our feet and vanishing. "This is edited," Veronica screamed, shooting to her feet. "This veteran is running psychological operations." She snapped her mouth shut when Agent Carla Ruiz rose, badge visible. "Mrs. Veronica Halston," she said, "you are under arrest for mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud government agencies, and racketeering under the RICO Act." The click of handcuffs locking around Veronica's wrists echoed over the sound system, carried out into living rooms across Montana by the TV broadcast. As deputies walked her toward the exit, she spat. "You people ruined everything. I was improving this community." I stepped back to the mic. "The only thing you improved," I said, "was our understanding of what organized theft looks like in a nice blazer." The place erupted. For straight minutes of applause, shouts, people on their feet. That night, the Maple Crest Owners Association was dissolved by a unanimous vote. In its place, we formed a real neighborhood association, with rotating leadership, independent oversight, and signatures verified by a third party. 6 months later, I'm back where this started, on my grandmother's porch, coffee in hand, watching kids ride bikes down a road that used to feel like a battlefield. The trench has been filled, the scar in the earth replaced with wildflowers. My business is busier than ever. Folks drive in from other towns just to hire the guy who took on the HOA. Veronica Halston is serving a federal sentence. Her husband was disbarred. Halston Ridge Realty and Halston Earthworks were dismantled, their assets sold to help pay more than $1.7 million in restitution. The state passed Ethan's Law, requiring independent verification for all HOA formations and giving homeowners real recourse against abuse. 23 other communities stepped forward with similar stories once they saw ours. As for my grandmother's garden, the one they tried to kill, it's alive again. We're planted from the tin of heirloom seeds she kept in the pantry. Those Irish tomatoes now feed half a dozen families every summer. Kids water the beds where poisoned soil used to lie, and Frank likes to say the garden looks more like Linda's than ever. Sometimes, reporters still call. Sometimes, people send letters thanking us for standing up. Sometimes, I just sit on that porch, listen to the wind in the pines, and let it be quiet. And I think about this. Laws don't always protect people on their own. Communities do. So if you woke up one morning and found a moat around your life, maybe not dirt, maybe paperwork, threats, bogus fines, trumped up complaints, would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you start knocking on doors, gathering your neighbors, and shining a light on what's really going on? Because at some point, every neighborhood has to decide, are we just a collection of houses, or are we the people inside them, willing to stand together when someone like Veronica Halston shows up and calls it improvement, while she tears everything apart?